The school bully was leaning against the railing of the teaching building, smoking. I calmly walked over and quickly snatched the half-burned cigarette from his mouth. Fine, that'll be 200. After staring at me blankly for a few seconds, the bully blurted out 2 words, "You idiot." A year later, I pulled his ear, and teased, "Who's the idiot?" He bent down, wrapping his arms around me, looking at me, with a pitiful expression like a wronged little wife. "The idiot is me." Not long after the second semester of sophomore year started, a handsome guy transferred to our class. I remember clearly the day the homeroom teacher called him to the front to introduce himself. He was tall and slender, wearing a plain white t-shirt and pure black sports pants, with a gray-blue backpack slung over one shoulder. His neat, short black hair swayed casually with his nonchalant steps. The corners of his mouth were slightly upturned, and his brows and eyes were free of worry. He had a rebellious yet gentle vibe. Ferdinand Mill. His voice was clear, with a slightly casual drawl at the end. As he walked past me, in the classroom corridor, the warm, glaring sunlight outside hit his profile just right, making his hair look fluffy. I couldn't help but raise the corners of my mouth slightly, resting my left hand on my face while my right hand quickly jotted down, "Ferdinand Mill," in my notebook. So good looking. Later, my deskmate Louise Dan asked if I had a crush on him, and I said no. Well, actually, it could be considered that. I thought Ferdinand Mill was a good boy. But I was wrong. Ferdinand Mill was a bad boy. Although that's not entirely accurate. He simply didn't care for attending classes, doing homework, or helping classmates. Basically, he wasn't interested in a lot of school-related things. He also didn't care to listen to me, the class monitor. But there was one thing, he loved playing the guitar. Ferdinand Mill would often sit on the bleachers of the school playground, strumming his wooden guitar and humming along. Today he'd sing, "Sunny day," tomorrow, "Best day," and the day after that, he might improvise something. The little fangirls on campus would line up to bring him flowers, while girls from outside would risk getting caught climbing over the walls just to catch a glimpse of him. It was quite troubling. Oh, and he loved climbing walls too. My notebook was filled with Ferdinand Mill. He was always late and often skipped classes. In my role as the class monitor, I frequently used the opportunity to collect homework to tell him, "Not handing in your homework means I'll mark you absent," and "Skipping classes means I'll mark you absent." At those times, he would casually spread his hands on the desk and nonchalantly reply, "Do whatever." What could I do? Handsome guys have a way of making you feel pity for them. Even though he would often take my attendance notebook from the drawer when I wasn't paying attention, and tease me by saying, 9 out of 10 pages have my name on them, Wendy Sally, do you like me? His little followers in class would then chime in, "Get together. Get together. Get together. I ship it. I ship it. I ship it." But there were always a few who were clueless. Ferdinand Mill is not someone you mere mortals can touch. I calmly sat at my desk, looking at him with my chin up. He was gazing down at me, with an amused expression. The noise in the classroom faded away, but it felt like I could only hear Ferdinand Mill's breathing. After a few seconds of locking eyes, he probably found it boring, and said, "Boring," before taking my notebook back to his seat. I followed him. "Give me back my notebook." Ferdinand Mill shot me a glance and tossed the notebook to his buddy, Norton Churchill. "You handle it." "Sure thing, bro." Then I watched as Norton Churchill tore it to shreds and threw it in the trash. Ferdinand Mill never even lifted his eyelids. Everyone around was too scared to breathe. I stood beside his desk for a few seconds, then silently returned to my seat. Ferdinand Mill was definitely a bad boy. I wouldn't feel sorry for him anymore. Everyone in class knew that the names I recorded would never reach the homeroom teacher. After my notebook was torn to pieces, I intentionally avoided Ferdinand Mill. I was doing it on purpose because I was really mad. However, it seemed Ferdinand Mill didn't care at all. This only made me angrier. He didn't even say sorry. Previously, I would annoy him repeatedly during homework collection, but now I skipped over him, knowing he wouldn't do the work or care about my words. But one time, as I was collecting math homework, he shoved his empty homework book into my hands, trying to pull a fast one with a blank book. Not a chance. I placed the homework book back on his desk, and walked away without looking back. After returning from the bathroom, I found a math homework book spread open on my desk. It was filled neatly with math problems written in black ink, and each problem had the solution process written underneath. It was evident he had put a lot of effort into it. I wondered who this person was and closed the homework book to check the name. To my surprise, Ferdinand Mill jumped out at me. I blinked and looked again carefully. It was indeed Ferdinand Mill. Feeling the heat of stares directed at me from behind, I didn't turn around. After silently putting away the homework book, I took all the math homework from the class to the office. It was only after school that my deskmate told me, "Ferdinand Mill personally put the homework book on your desk, he's changed." I lowered my head, listening carefully, and the corners of my mouth lifted unconsciously. Even though Ferdinand Mill had taken the initiative to make peace, I still felt a bit awkward inside. What was awkward, I couldn't quite say. When Ferdinand Mill approached me in the corridor outside the classroom, I felt a tension in my head, forcing myself to look elsewhere or to find someone I knew to cover up the awkwardness. Maybe this was the conflicting psychology of a teenage girl. Clearly, I wasn't angry anymore, but my actions still showed that I was upset. Counting the days, Ferdinand Mill and I hadn't spoken in a week. What to do? I felt a bit dejected, but the longer it went on, the more I hesitated to speak. I could only let the distance grow larger until we finally became strangers. The second weekend coincided with the New Year's party at school, and Ferdinand Mill went to rehearsals every day. Our meeting time became even scarcer, and opportunities to talk diminished. Every time, I could see a tall girl with long, wavy black hair calling him from the back door to go rehearse. Ferdinand Mill would unhesitatingly grab his guitar and follow her. That girl had a soft, sweet voice, a lovely smile, and was very pretty. Even as a girl, I couldn't help but feel a fondness for her, let alone boys. When I got home at night, I couldn't help but check myself out in the mirror. My features were indeed quite balanced, but I looked bland, with noticeable dark circles under my eyes. I told myself, this is how a teenage girl should look, don't overthink it. But the more I told myself this, the more blocked I felt inside. The day before the New Year's party, the homeroom teacher gave me 10 tickets for the event to distribute to the classmates, reminding me to keep one for myself. But I didn't keep one. My deskmate Louise Dan asked why I wasn't going, considering I had been eager to watch it. I didn't look up, still focused on solving math problems, just lost interest all of a sudden. That evening, there was no evening study session for our class. I was bored and a bit anxious, so I took my MP3 player to the bleachers on the playground. The bleachers were dark, and the playground was warm and golden. I found a front row seat, turned on my MP3 player, put on my headphones, and quietly listened to music while watching the busy people on the playground. Clearly, I was lively, and loved to laugh, but in this aspect, I was so sensitive and prone to overthinking. For example, about Ferdinand Mill. I desperately wanted to act, but stubbornly, I held back, as if I had to prove that I didn't care about anything. As I listened to the songs, my eyes started to well up. I checked the time on my watch, it was quite late, and I prepared to head home. Just as I pulled out my headphones, a white plastic bag landed at my feet. Something was inside it. Confused, I turned my head to the right, and a glimmer of light suddenly appeared. "Here you go." It was Ferdinand Mill's voice. I froze for a few seconds, then rubbed my eyes. "The light from your phone is blinding me." After a moment of silence, Ferdinand Mill turned off his phone light. What a hassle. Though his tone was somewhat impatient, I felt warm inside. I blinked, unable to clearly see his face. That was fine. It had a mysterious romance to it. "What's in the bag?" I asked, pointing at the white plastic bag on the ground. Ferdinand Mill put down his guitar, and sat down beside me. "Notebooks." I opened the bag and found 5 notebooks inside. One was identical to the one I had before, while the other 4 were different styles, but all had exquisite covers. "Are all these for me?" Ferdinand Mill replied slowly. "What else?" "Oh, I really like them." Silence fell around us as I nervously fiddled with my fingers, quickly brainstorming the next topic. "Wendy Sally, HMM." I turned to look at him. "Do you want me to humbly beg for your forgiveness?" "I've never felt this humiliated in my life," he said, as if he had made a huge decision. Everything around us seemed to fall silent, and I felt like I could see his expression through the darkness. "No," I hurriedly replied. "I even did my math homework, and you're still mad at me." I spent a long time working on that math book for this homework, and I've got dark circles under my eyes now." There was a hint of complaint in his tone, but it was quite cute. It truly wasn't easy for him to do math homework. In fact, I wasn't angry anymore, I was just stubbornly upset over nothing. "I'm not angry, I just don't know how to face you. Ferdinand Mill, can you sing me a song and play your guitar?" "Can't," he refused flatly. I tried to be a bit cheeky, but I really want to hear it. "Embarrassing. Is it embarrassing to sing for me?" I frowned at him. "Not really. Can't you just say what you mean all at once?" I followed his gaze and saw a group of people on the playground. I understood. If he lowered himself to sing just for one girl, everyone would see it, and he wouldn't be able to maintain his aloof and noble image. I glanced at my watch. "Then maybe next time, you can sing for me." He didn't say anything. It was getting late, and if I didn't go home soon, my mom would start to worry. But I was really reluctant to leave. After hesitating for a few minutes, I finally spoke up. "I'm heading home now." "You should go home early too. Thanks for the notebook." I took a white peach-flavored lollipop out of my pocket. "Here, this is for you. I want a Fujiya one." Okay, I'll buy you one next time." Just as I was about to retract the lollipop, Ferdinand Mill suddenly snatched it from my hand. He ruffled his hair. "This will do. Hey, all right. I'm off then." As I spoke, I picked up my bag to leave. "Wait, sing, sing, sing." Ferdinand Mill's voice was a bit urgent. I paused, thinking for a moment. "There's no one in the classroom right now. How about we sing there, right here?" I sat back down. Ferdinand Mill took out his guitar, and got into position. "What do you want to hear?" Without hesitation, I replied, "I'll listen to whatever you sing." He nodded and strummed the guitar. His deep voice blended with the gentle winter night breeze, resonating in my ears. Each word felt like it was dancing on my heart, and the surrounding temperature gradually rose. I bent my leg, resting my face on one hand, watching him earnestly. Although I couldn't see his expression clearly, every time he looked at me, I could truly feel his presence. At that moment, he was singing just for me. It didn't matter if anyone on the playground was watching us. That evening, we left the school together. He quietly followed beside me, reminding me to be safe before we parted ways. It was nice. Ferdinand Mill was a good boy. When I got home, I surprisingly ate 2 late-night snacks, laughing while I did so, which couldn't escape my mom's keen observation. She sent my dad to another room so we could sleep together. Before leaving, my dad gave me a look of grievance. Lying in bed with my mom, she excitedly asked, "Sweetheart, do you have a boy you like?" I wrapped my arms around her and rested my head on her shoulder, feeling a bit shy. "I guess so. Is he good to you? What does he look like? What's his name? What's his personality like?" I quickly interrupted. "Stop. Let me finish before you ask." I turned to lie closely against my mom, burying my head in her arm. "He's pretty nice. Looks good too. His name is Ferdinand Mill, and he has a great personality." "That's wonderful. What are you thinking about him now?" "What am I thinking? I hadn't thought about it." After some serious contemplation, I replied, "I want to become an outstanding person, before appearing in front of him. I also hope he can become an outstanding person too." My mom stroked my hair gently, saying, "Our sweetheart is already an outstanding person. If Ferdinand Mill isn't outstanding, how could you possibly like him?" "Yeah, right." I hugged my mom's waist and leaned against her. Even though Ferdinand Mill was somewhat of a rebel at school, he hadn't done anything too outrageous, just climbed walls and skipped classes. He had never disrespected anyone and even helped clean up around school sometimes, scolding outsiders who climbed over the walls. When it came to music, he was extremely passionate. He was already very impressive. He sings so well. Right. Hurry up and sleep. You can't go to school with dark circles under your eyes tomorrow." "Okay." My mom was so soft and warm. I was a mama's girl. The next day, I walked into the classroom, beaming. As usual, the last row near the door was still empty. Ferdinand Mill was going to be late again today. "What are you standing there for? Get back to your seat." I doubted I had heard correctly. Turning around and looking up, I saw Ferdinand Mill's distant and cold face. If he hadn't sung for me yesterday, I would have thought he was angry with me. Why are you here so early? I didn't understand. He yawned, looking drowsy. Why, if you can come early, why can't I? I chuckled teasingly. How rare. Go memorize your lines. He shrugged, slightly smiling, and walked around me back to his seat. I smiled contentedly and returned to my own seat. After the morning reading class, the homeroom teacher called several of us class representatives to the office, saying that the Education Bureau people were coming to inspect today. We must ensure that our classmates follow school rules and study diligently. As soon as I stepped out of the office, I saw Ferdinand Mill leaning against the corridor railing outside the classroom, smoking. Norton Churchill was beside him, and they were laughing and chatting casually. Feeling a surge of responsibility, after just assuring the teacher I could handle this, I calmly walked up to Ferdinand Mill in front of everyone, raised my chin, and smiled at him. Then, I quickly stood on my tiptoes, and snatched the half-burned cigarette from his mouth. Fines of 200. He stared at me in confusion for a long time before finally laughing, and saying, "You silly." Norton Churchill was laughing so hard he could barely stand up. He suddenly patted my shoulder, nearly making me lose my balance. Ferdinand Mill kicked him lightly, and coldly said, "Get lost." Ha ha ha. Okay, bro. Norton Churchill laughed and ran off. My deskmate, Louise Dan, silently walked over to the edge of my vision, and gave me a thumbs up. Ferdinand Mill looked down at me, and I looked up at him, creating a somewhat awkward atmosphere. I awkwardly explained, "The Education Bureau people are here today. You can't smoke." "Give it to me." "No way. Are you stupid?" He shook his head with a smile, reaching out his hand. "Give me the cigarette. I'll put it out." Inside, I was overjoyed, but I remained calm on the surface. "Oh, here you go." I obediently handed him the cigarette. After watching him extinguish the cigarette and throw it into the trash can, I turned around, satisfied, and headed back to the classroom. "Don't go," Ferdinand Mill called out to me. I turned back, and he walked towards me, with his hands in his pockets. The people around us began to stir again, and I suddenly felt a bit nervous, my temples pounding. Ferdinand Mill approached me and pulled out 2 red bills from his pocket, handing them to me. "Here's your 200. I hurried to explain, "I was just joking. Don't take it seriously." What should I do? He was so easygoing. I liked him even more. "Fine, 200 in fines. I'll take it as a lesson for myself." Before I could react, Ferdinand Mill bent down and shoved the 200 yuan into my pocket, then turned and left with Norton Churchill, arms over each other's shoulders, heading toward the bathroom. At that moment when he bent down, my heart raced to the limit. He was close enough for me to smell the tobacco scent on him, but I didn't like that smell. I touched the 200 yuan in my pocket, watching his retreating figure, my heart pounding wildly. After school, I stopped Ferdinand Mill, who was preparing to leave with his guitar. "I'm returning the 200 to you." He waved his hand. "Just keep it for now. Next time I smoke, you can find me another 200. Watching his figure disappear through the glass, I murmured, "Okay." After the final exams, Ferdinand Mill invited me to a party. On that day, my mom styled my hair gently and chose a very elegant coat for me. I was now both gentle and elegant. Before I left, my mom gave me a thumbs up for encouragement. Ferdinand Mill came downstairs to pick me up. When we arrived at the KTV room, Norton Churchill and a strange guy were already there, along with the girl who had called Ferdinand Mill to practice. Feeling a bit uneasy, I chose a less noticeable spot to sit. I thought Ferdinand Mill would mingle with them, but to my surprise, he sat right beside me. Now all the eyes were fixed on me. One of the more refined guys with glasses sat down next to me. "Hello, I'm Mick Romeo." I nodded in response. "Hello, I know, Wendy Sally." "Right. Ferdinand Mill often talks about you, saying you always like to keep an eye on him." I looked at Ferdinand Mill, stammering, "I don't do that. I manage the others in class the same way." "Is that so? I haven't seen you pressuring anyone to turn in their homework every day." Ferdinand Mill grinned. I felt a bit guilty. Mick Romeo leaned in closer. "You're so pretty, and have such good grades. There must be a lot of guys pursuing you, right?" I shook my head. "No, I haven't noticed." "Then what do you think of me, your older brother?" I was momentarily stunned, furrowing my brow at Mick Romeo. He was very close, and there was an unmistakable hint of flirtation on his face. I felt a bit scared. Norton Churchill warned, "Don't mess around. Be careful or Ferdinand Mill will beat you up." Norton Churchill switched seats with me. I could feel Mick Romeo's eyes never leaving me. Norton Churchill, what the hell? I just want to be friends with her. Is that a problem? I don't care. Ferdinand Mill told me to keep an eye on her. Mick Romeo seemed a bit annoyed and stood up to sit beside me again. Mick Romeo, what are you doing? The girl who called for Ferdinand Mill to rehearse wrapped her arms around mine, glaring fiercely at him with her big eyes. Norton Churchill grabbed his arm, pulling him back, and whispered through gritted teeth, "Don't think I don't know your character. If it weren't for you helping Ferdinand Mill, you wouldn't even be here tonight." Mick Romeo angrily shrugged him off, and slumped back into his seat. He kicked the table leg hard, muttering some obscenity under his breath. I felt a twinge of fear and instinctively clutched the girl's sleeve. She comforted me, saying, "Don't worry, he's just like that, he talks big when he sees pretty girls." I nodded absent-mindedly. "I'm Violet, a friend of Ferdinand Mill and Norton Churchill." She smiled brightly, which eased my anxious heart a little. "Thank you." "Oh, it's nothing. Let's have Ferdinand Mill take you home later." I nodded in agreement. Just then, the KTV room door swung open, and Ferdinand Mill walked in with several bottles of alcohol. He glanced at me, frowned, and asked, "Are you feeling unwell?" I squeezed my sweaty palms and smiled. "No, I just want to go home." He didn't ask further. "All right, then let's go." Ferdinand Mill put the bottles on the table and took my hand, leading me out of the room. Before we exited, he glanced back at Mick Romeo. On the way home, he apologized. "I'm sorry." We stopped under a dim yellow streetlight, and he hung his head, looking a bit downcast. I smiled and tugged at his shirt hem. "It's okay." He sighed heavily, muttering, "I'm such an idiot." "What are you saying?" I lightly tapped him. He sighed and chuckled. "All right, let's get you home. By the way, there's a supermarket ahead. Wait for me here, I'll be quick." Before he could respond, I jogged ahead toward the supermarket. A few minutes later, I hurried back with what I had bought. Ferdinand Mill was standing under the streetlight, looking like a well-behaved child. When he saw me, he jogged over, saying, "Don't run, be careful not to fall." I handed him the things I had bought. "Here you go, Pepero." "Yeah, since you're taking me home, this is your fare." He opened the bag, pulled out one, tore it open, and popped it into his mouth, saying, "To take you home." The next day, I went downstairs to buy groceries, and was about to head home when I was suddenly called out. At the sound of that voice, my body stiffened involuntarily. Mick Romeo walked up to me. "Hey, little sister, what a coincidence." I forced a not-so-nice smile. "Oh, my mom is waiting for me at home. I have to go." He raised his hand to block me. "Wait, chat with your big brother for a bit." Gathering my courage, I stubbornly replied, "Sorry, I don't have time." With that, I tried to walk past him. "Stop pretending to be innocent." I froze in place, feeling a surge of anger. "Don't use innocence to trap girls. Take a look in the mirror first." I blurted this out and walked quickly home without looking back. When I got home, my mom noticed something was off, but I didn't want to worry her, so I didn't say much. I only mentioned that I ran into a scoundrel, and that I had chased him off. My dad was worried and stayed downstairs with a shovel for a long time. After that, I rarely went downstairs. But Mick Romeo still didn't give up. I don't know how he got my contact information, but the first time he called, he harassed me, saying, "Let's hang out." I blocked him. The next day, he called from a new number, saying, "Come play with your brother. He's rich." I blocked him again. The third time, he said, "There are plenty of girls chasing me. If I like you, you should be grateful. Don't be ungrateful." But I really didn't understand how he had so many numbers. In the end, I started feeling sick every time I saw an unknown number. Gradually, the strange calls decreased, and aside from the usual spam calls, I didn't receive any more from Mick Romeo. I thought he had probably given up. On New Year's Eve, I sat by the window watching the snow fall outside. I put my phone on the table, but couldn't help checking it repeatedly. Fortunately, I finally received the long-awaited call. I couldn't help but say first, Happy New Year. There was a brief silence on the other end, then a gentle reply. Yeah, Happy New Year, and many more. I was overjoyed, though I tried to suppress the excitement in my voice. What were you doing just now? Watching the snow fall. What a coincidence. So was I, listening to music. I rested my chin on my hand, cheerfully asking, will you sing for me? Sure. Okay. I felt that tonight. Ferdinand Mill was exceptionally gentle, a stark contrast to his usual wild nature. Maybe it was just my self-indulgence. Tonight's snow, tonight's people, tonight's music, all felt so gentle. His deep, husky voice came through the phone, and I covered my face with my hands, my heart overflowing with sweetness. After he finished singing, I took a few deep breaths and quietly asked, Ferdinand Mill, would you be willing to go to the same university as me in the future? After stumbling through that question, I nervously picked at my fingers, my heart racing, pressing my ear against the phone. I felt like I could hear Ferdinand Mill's steady breathing. Sure. The 8th day of the new year was the start of school. During those 8 days, I took copious notes, Ferdinand Mill's tutoring plan, his week subjects, and his schedule. His grades weren't great, he was middle to lower tier, but he was taking an art exam. If he improved just a bit, getting into a good university wouldn't be a problem. On the first day of school, I excitedly went to class with my thick notes. My classmates were busy, catching up on their winter break homework, laughing and chatting. Ferdinand Mill's seat was empty. I figured he would be late again. Louise Dan snuck up on me and grabbed my backpack from the drawer, saying, Wendy Sally, I'm just borrowing your winter homework. Okay. Wait a minute. Too late. She had already seen my notes. I flushed and felt flustered. Being caught like this was quite thrilling. Louise Dan felt a bit awkward too. She cleared her throat and leaned in to tease. I didn't see anything. I just saw your winter homework. I pinched her gently and threatened. Big mouths deserve to go to hell. She raised an eyebrow, confidently patting her chest. Don't worry, my lips are sealed. The short time passed in laughter and banter between Louise Dan and me. The bell for the end of the early study period rang, and Ferdinand Mill still hadn't arrived. He didn't show up after the first period either. Second, third, and until noon, he was still absent. But Ferdinand Mill had never missed this long before. Feeling uneasy, I stopped Norton Churchill as he was leaving. Why wasn't Ferdinand Mill here this morning? Norton Churchill looked a bit awkward, stammering for a while without saying anything concrete, finally just saying, maybe he's still sleeping in, haha, before grabbing his bag and running off. His demeanor made me even more anxious. During lunch, I rushed home and immediately called Ferdinand Mill. The phone rang and rang, but no one answered. I called several times, but still no response. I felt worried and a bit aggrieved. I barely ate lunch, making my parents think I was sick. In the afternoon, during evening study, Ferdinand Mill still hadn't come. He had been absent all day. Norton Churchill also deliberately avoided me. I had no choice but to find Violet after evening study. Violet, do you know why Ferdinand Mill didn't come to school today? She looked puzzled. Hey, he didn't come. I'm not sure. I frowned, feeling a bit deflated. Violet pulled me aside and took out her phone watch to make a call. Norton Churchill, come to our class right away. Hurry up. Don't make me wait long. After hanging up, Violet had me sit at her desk and kept comforting me. Don't worry. Norton Churchill and Ferdinand Mill are good friends. He must know. I'll help you ask when he gets here. I fidgeted in my seat, whispering a thank you. Norton Churchill showed up in a few minutes, but as soon as he saw me, he bolted. If it weren't for Violet scolding him loudly to stay, he probably would have disappeared long ago. Violet grabbed his ear and pulled him in front of me. Tell me why Ferdinand Mill didn't come today. If you don't, I swear I'll beat you up. I dared not blink, staring at him, afraid of missing any of his expressions. Ferdinand Mill. He recently attended a music festival. He'll be back in a few days. Ha ha ha, I blurted out. Then why isn't he answering my calls? Norton Churchill broke free from Violet's grip. Well, maybe he didn't see them. Then why hasn't he called me back? I really don't know. I have something to do, so I'm leaving. Before he finished, he grabbed his backpack and ran off, ignoring Violet's shouts. After thanking Violet, I went home. That evening, I couldn't focus on my homework and kept calling Ferdinand Mill. I sent a series of messages, but there was no reply. The next day, I went to see my homeroom teacher. Ferdinand Mill has dropped out. Teacher, did Ferdinand Mill really drop out? Why did he drop out? I found it hard to believe. I can't disclose that. Just don't worry about it. Focus on your studies in your senior year. But, alright, you can go back now. I stood there for a moment, then reluctantly returned to class. All day, I was distracted. After returning home in a daze, I still couldn't give up and sent Ferdinand Mill a few more messages. If you ignore me, just return my lollipop. $200 back to you. It annoys me to see it. I'm really angry. After anxiously waiting for a minute, I heard the notification sound. I received a reply. I'm downstairs at your building. I didn't care about my messy hair, or whether my clothes were neat, or if my face was dirty. I was afraid he'd leave if I was late. Running downstairs, I saw him leaning against a streetlight, looking lonely. I rushed over, wanting to ask him why he was ignoring me, but when I saw his despondent face, my voice caught in my throat. He had deep dark circles under his eyes, a waxy complexion, chat lips, and looked like he had lost weight. All my words condensed into one question: haven't you taken care of yourself? He paused for a moment, then replied nonchalantly, I'm fine. I've just had some insomnia lately. Seeing him like that made my heart ache, and I couldn't help but cry. Why are you crying? I'm fine. He raised his hand to wipe away my tears gently. Didn't I come to see you? I bit my lip and finally asked the question that had been on my mind. Why did you drop out? His hand, which had been wiping my tears, froze. He looked down, seeming a bit at a loss. I continued, I want to know the reason. After a long silence, he pulled his hand back, sighed, and said casually, my mom enrolled me in a better high school, where I can learn more, and have better opportunities to perform. It's way better than this school. You'd want me to have a better future, right? Is that the truth? Yes, it is. I didn't believe him, but I didn't want to force him. I forced a smile, propping my chin up and asking, can we go to the same city for college in the future? He smiled back and said, yes, trust me. He added, Wendy Sally, study hard and let me see how far you can go. I nodded, tears in my eyes. Wendy Sally isn't the kind of person who would easily give up over something small, right? I nodded, I won't give up easily either. When he said this, his gaze was full of emotion, and I could see the resilience within him. Get into a good university, and wait for me, okay? He turned and left. As he walked away, I stood there, tears streaming down my face, the snow piled layer upon layer, and suddenly I felt a bit scared. Senior year was incredibly fulfilling yet also dull and tedious. I spent my days either buried in problems or lying in books, holding on to my promise in my heart. I dared not relax for a moment. I remembered I had promised someone I would reach great heights. Senior year went by quickly, almost in the blink of an eye. During that year, Ferdinand Mill didn't contact me at all. Had he forgotten about me? The college entrance examination was approaching fast, and just before I walked into the exam hall, I kept silently reciting, Wendy Sally can reach great heights. After the results came out, I scored 689 points, enough to get into Qingdao University. I reached great heights. Would I be able to see you there? On the day of university registration, I was fortunate enough to be assigned to the same dormitory as Violet. When we met, we both exclaimed in surprise. A week after military training, the school was holding a welcome party in the auditorium, and Violet managed to get me a ticket. It was still in the front row. The opening dance excited me, and Violet was so thrilled that she kept slapping my thigh. During the host's announcements, I couldn't help but think of Ferdinand Mill. I wondered where he was, what he was doing, and whether he had come to this city. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my thigh, almost yelping out loud. What a mood killer! I looked at Violet in annoyance, only to find her with her mouth agape, eyes wide in shock, staring at the stage. Following her gaze, I was equally stunned. The person standing on stage holding a guitar was none other than Ferdinand Mill. I would never forget his exuberant demeanor. He just happened to glance in my direction. His smile was bright, just like back then, The gentle breeze swayed, and the old friend was still there. Violet kept saying things to me, but I unconsciously blocked them out. My mind was solely focused on the person on stage. My head was buzzing. After a year, I was seeing him again. I should have been happy, but my heart felt exceptionally bitter. After Ferdinand Mill finished performing and came off the stage, I felt a bit suffocated. I quietly told Violet, "I'm leaving," and then hurried out. Outside the auditorium, I happened to see him surrounded by several girls. My heart sank further. I felt like a deserter, running away from the chaos in my heart. Back in the dorm, my roommates Sophia and Luna were excitedly huddled together, occasionally squealing in delight. I sat at my desk, listening to their conversation, forcing myself to shift my focus. Sophia exclaimed, "The guy on the confession wall is so handsome. He's both good-looking and talented. Which department is he from?" Luna echoed her surprise. "So trendy. He looks like he's from the art school. There's a comment on the wall with this handsome guy's name, and it sounds nice. Ferdinand Mill. Ferdinand Mill. He made it to the confession wall." It seemed that no matter the time, he was always the most dazzling presence in the crowd. I buried my head on the desk, covering my ears, when the door suddenly burst open. Violet rushed to my side, pulling me up from the desk. "Wendy, Sally, Ferdinand Mill is attending this school too. He just asked me where you went." Upon hearing this, Sophia and Luna hurried over to me. "Do you know that handsome guy? Are you close?" As I contemplated how to respond, Violet jumped in first. "They're super close. Ferdinand Mill listens to what Wendy Sally says." "Hey." Sophia and Luna looked curious. "Is there a story here?" I felt helpless, just ordinary friends. The next day, I was slapped in the face by reality, because Ferdinand Mill showed up early in the morning at the dormitory building with breakfast for me. I stood on the steps while he stood below, and we looked at each other in silence. I still felt a bit angry. After a long standoff, he called me, "Wendy, Sally." I nodded. "If you don't eat breakfast soon, it'll get cold." I nodded again, mustering the courage to walk towards him. All the girls around were watching me, and the pressure was immense. Ferdinand Mill handed me the breakfast: boiled egg, 3-flavor bun, soy milk, all your favorites. He still remembered, but I didn't take it. "Thanks, but I've already eaten." I really had eaten already. His hand froze in mid-air, but he still managed a smile and said, "No problem, I'll bring you breakfast again tomorrow." After he left, Sophia and Luna interrogated me relentlessly. Fine, I admit it, we were pretty close before, but he hadn't talked to me in a year, and I felt I needed to teach him a lesson. Soon, this incident ended up on the confession wall. Some comments said I was pretending to be aloof, and Violet confronted that person in the comments. What surprised me was that Ferdinand Mill also appeared in the comments. He said, "I'm Ferdinand Mill, and I willingly brought breakfast." That one sentence made us both popular in college. The next morning, he was indeed waiting downstairs for me, holding breakfast in his hands. He looked a bit nervous. This time, I decided to face him calmly. I walked down, took the breakfast from him, and said, "Thank you." Then I went to the classroom. On the 3rd, 4th, and 5th days, Ferdinand Mill was just as consistent. I was happy, but he was too straightforward. After several days of bringing me the same breakfast, I started to get tired of it. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore, and told him, "Don't bring me breakfast anymore." He looked a bit at a loss. "Wendy, Sally, did I do something wrong again?" I shook my head. "Then can you give me a few more chances?" I smiled and took out 200 yuan from my pocket. "Here you go." "I don't want it." "Ferdinand Mill," I called out to him. He looked a bit dejected, mumbling, "Don't think you can distance yourself from me?" Feeling a bit helpless, I pointed my finger at his chest. 200 should be enough to buy a fool, right? I stepped up the stairs and waved my hand, "Bend down." Although he didn't understand, he obediently bent down. I gently tugged on his ear. "Who's the fool?" He immediately realized, shouting, "The fool is me. 200 is enough for a fool." Everyone around turned to look at us. I felt a bit embarrassed and let go, but Ferdinand Mill wrapped his arms around me, looking at me like a wronged little wife. "The fool is me." And just like that, I became his girlfriend. The school held a basketball game at the court. and I went to cheer for Ferdinand Mill. Every time he scored a point, he would secretly throw flirtatious glances my way. During halftime, he even whined for me to open a bottle for him. I did. It seemed I wouldn't get to experience the joy of having my boyfriend open bottles for me. During winter break, my mom called and asked me to bring Ferdinand Mill home. I was stunned. I hadn't even told my mom I was dating anyone. The culprit stood there looking innocent, pulling a suitcase and staring at me. Who knows how many times he contacted my mom behind my back this semester. Well, I softened up. If I didn't bring him home, would I still be my mom's favorite? My mom seemed to have endless things to talk about with Ferdinand Mill. The consequence was that my mom found out I had a crush on Ferdinand Mill throughout high school. I was mortified. My mom had a motherly grin, and Ferdinand Mill looked all smug. Later, he told me he had been smitten for a long time too, but he said, even if I'm in love, I can't start dating early. My beloved girl still needs to reach greater heights. Blushing in his arms, I felt a bit lightheaded. During college, Ferdinand Mill and I became the model couple on campus. Ferdinand Mill seemed to have a special obsession with the confession wall. Every time someone mentioned him there, he would appear in the comments, leaving a line, already taken. Later, I found out people were also mentioning me on the confession wall. I left a message, already have a follower. Ferdinand Mill was always reluctant to talk about his family. I knew he had childhood trauma, but he eventually took me to meet his parents. He said, Wendy Sally deserves a complete proposal ceremony. Fortunately, his parents blessed us. His dad even thanked me, saying, thank you for guiding my son back on track. I replied, Ferdinand Mill has never gone off track. Ferdinand Mill had a difficult childhood, so I always wanted to give him a bit more sweetness. So I bought a lot of boxes of lollipops, enough to sweeten him for a lifetime. What does it feel like to be with the person you liked in high school? This was a question the host asked me during a show. I said, it's like the joy of nurturing a relationship. On the eve of my wedding to Ferdinand Mill, I met Mick Romeo. He had shed his once flamboyant persona, and seemed more composed now. He apologized to me, and told me to live well with Ferdinand Mill. That was when I learned the true reason why Ferdinand Mill dropped out in his senior year. That night when I got home, I didn't say a word. After all, I compensated with my actions. There would be plenty of time to make up for it later. On our wedding day, Ferdinand Mill cried like a baby. No longer the high school bully who dominated. He looked just like a 3-year-old child. We kissed amidst everyone's blessings. I held his waist and noticed he was shaking all over. It made me think he was scared of marriage. But that night, I realized my misunderstanding. I often teased him for being a love-struck clingy person. He never denied it and insisted on getting close to me. What could I do? A handsome guy has a charm that makes you want to cherish him, especially when he's my handsome guy. Asterisk asterisk epilogue asterisk 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 Ferdinand Mill asterisk asterisk. When I was 10, my mom divorced my dad and didn't want to raise me. My dad only gave me money. He didn't give me anything else. The affection that other kids easily received was an unattainable luxury for me. No matter how much money I spent, the older I got, the more rebellious I became. To spite my dad, I deliberately slacked off. I don't know how many schools I switched from elementary to high school. In the second semester of my sophomore year, I transferred again. The new class was just as annoying. Some classmates fawned over me, some looked down on me, and others hated me. At first, I thought Wendy Sally was just like the rest. Every time she collected homework, she would impatiently urge me. I wanted to explode, but every time I saw her clean and flawless face, I felt as if I was sealed. I thought if I ignored her, she would give up, but unexpectedly, she persisted for months. I thought this girl was interesting. Her notebook was filled with my name. That day, I don't know what got into me. I teased her in front of the whole class, even snatching her notebook and having Norton Churchill deal with it. That bastard Norton Churchill. I thought I could trust him, but he tore it up and threw it in the trash. I initially wanted to apologize right there, but my damn pride glued my mouth shut. In the following days, she intentionally avoided me. I panicked. I was used to her buzzing in my ear. The sudden silence felt unsettling. So, I took action. That week, I dragged Norton Churchill to stay up late, and neatly finished the math homework assigned by our teacher. When she collected the homework, I finally mustered the courage to hand her my notebook, only for her to return it immediately. I was stunned. If this were before, I would have exploded, cursing under my breath. I'm not serving you. Do whatever you want. But I still backed down. At heart, while she was out, I placed the notebook back on her desk. To make sure she saw I really did finish it, I left it open. In the end, she took my notebook but didn't turn around to look at me or say anything. I didn't understand why. Despite my active apology, she still refused to acknowledge me, and deliberately avoided me. While walking, I wanted to greet her, but she naturally sidestepped every time. I felt defeated and pulled Norton Churchill to stay up a few more late nights. Who asked him to tear up the notebook? On New Year's Eve, Wendy Sally asked if I wanted to go to college in the same city as her. I agreed. After much hesitation, I still said yes. After hanging up, I regretted it, but I didn't want to take back what I said, because that was my honest feeling. When school started, I couldn't keep the promise. Wendy Sally called me many times and sent numerous messages, but I still softened and went to see her. At that moment, I realized I had already fallen for her. But even if I had fallen, I couldn't date early. I said, Wendy Sally, let me see how high you can soar. I will do my best to catch up to you. I didn't want her to neglect her studies because of me or to be disappointed. Whatever I said, she agreed. She was really obedient to the point of making me feel guilty. But what could I do? I was a dropout, not deserving to stand beside her. After we parted, I changed my past lethargy, shamelessly asking my dad to send me to another high school. He refused, so I sang on the streets to earn my tuition. Throughout my senior year, I didn't dare to slack off. I remembered I once told someone, I will never easily give up. The arts exam was very successful, and my college entrance exam results were also good. At that point, my dad finally started to take me seriously. After learning from Norton Churchill which school Wendy Sally applied to, I applied there too, making it my first choice. Fortunately, we were both accepted. I immediately wanted to share the joy with Wendy Sally, but I also wanted to give her a big surprise. After reporting to college, I saw her at the welcome party, but she seemed angry with me and didn't want to see me. I panicked. The next day, I woke up early to buy breakfast and waited downstairs for her. She didn't accept it. I didn't give up and kept sending it. She must have been touched and finally accepted my breakfast. Later, she accepted me as well, and just like that, I found myself in a relationship. My roommates said I looked like a lovesick peacock, and I didn't refute it. Indeed, when I fell in love, it was a mess. I really like Wendy Sally. Wendy Sally ***. A few years after graduation, Ferdinand Mill and I got married. On our wedding night, I asked him how much he loved me. He said he couldn't express it with words but could prove it with actions. So, I ended up with back pain for several days. He was always clingy, wanting to go with me even when I took out the trash. If I came home a few minutes late, he would bombard me with calls. Even though we were nearly 30, he still acted so childish. In the end, he spilled all his high school secrets, trying to make me feel sorry for him. Although I already knew, his intention was still achieved. It turned out Ferdinand Mill was also striving to be with me. This story has come to an end. Thank you for subscribing to the channel, where you can always get the latest content, with plenty of novels updated every day.